Thank you. So, by the way, I'm no longer executive chairman. I'm just chairman. So, mesdames et messieurs, friends of the Toronto Global Forum, bonjour et bienvenue. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce our next speaker, l'Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Industry, Science and Economic Development. Minister Champagne has the rare distinction of having earned 3 law degrees at Université de Montréal, l'Académie du droit international in The Hague, and a Master of Law from the Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, which happens to be a Cogeco market. He has worked in business as a lawyer in the United States, Italy, Switzerland, and the UK, and he's been active on numerous boards of directors. The minister is now devoting his life to public service through politics, where he's been Minister of International Trade, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Industry, Science, and Economic Development. Minister Champagne has many achievements to his credit. I cannot reference them all, but here are a few. Minister Champagne has tirelessly visited governors in many states of the United States to remind them of the mutual economic benefits that bind our two countries, and he has been particularly effective in that regard. Minister Champagne, you will know, is a real down-to-earth doer. So he's been active in positioning Canada in numerous industries, including automobiles, clean energy, battery industries, drawing considerable foreign investment to our country. We are fortunate to be able to count on a minister of his international stature with a strong understanding of business to create wealth for our citizens. AmberMac, president of AmberMac Media, will be interviewing the minister. Please join me in welcoming AmberMac and the Member of Parliament for Saint-Maurice-Champlain and Minister of Industry, Science and Economic Development, l'Honorable François-Philippe Champagne.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my friend. Let me. I don't know, Cleveland was your market. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Champagne for breakfast, no? Not too bad, to start the day. Here we go.
All right. So I was told we had 20 minutes, but now we have 15 minutes. But I think we can do this.
We'll try.
We'll give it a whirl.
We'll try.
All right. So we are going to focus on scaling for a sustainable future. That is the theme of the event, particularly decarbonization and digitization. My first question to you, we're starting back just on October 1st of this year. Chinese-made EVs are subject to 100% tariff now in Canada. How do we close the gap and catch up, knowing that in the Chinese market, they have been making EVs for 2 decades now?
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to the forum and to Monsieur Rémillard for putting that. I think it's the 17 or 18 years I'm looking at the crowd to help me. And for all of you who've gathered here in Toronto from across the world, I would say, I met people in the back. I would say to all of you, I kind of look at the world today, particularly these days, in kind of a 4D dimension. I call them the 4D of the world in which we live in. The first one you touched upon is decarbonization. And there's no doubt that if you want to succeed in the economy of the 21st century, you need to decarbonize. And in that, I would say, as you said, Canada is at the forefront, whether it's steel, aluminum, the battery and the EV market, where I think the destination is clear. Now, the time to get there, people can disagree. There'll be market adjustment. But I keep reminding people that when you change the way you've been doing things for 100 years, obviously you have market adjustments. I mean, anyone who believes otherwise has not looked at history. Remember that Tesla took 17 years to be profitable. And if you read Henry Ford Model T, it was not like an early adoption. So I think that is thing, but Canada is the forefront. The other D for me is digitization. So how the impact of AI and quantum in everything we do will have a tremendous impact. And I think for me, this is the holy grail of productivity,
sure.
And prosperity. I was just talking at the G7, I think, earlier last week, virtually, because you may have seen there's a couple of things going on in this country. So I had to participate virtually to the G7 this time, but it was interesting to discuss with colleagues about, the nature of the world. And it's kind of funny where people say, we have problems, you have issues, that's kind of a different things. When you're in Canada, you have to be mindful of the state of the world. The other D for me is the demography. And people will know for a long time that demography is destiny. So how you make sure you have immigration policy to attract talent, and I think in that Canada is certainly a magnet for talent. And I would say above everything else, talent is probably the most scarce resources today. I mean, it exists, but how you attract it and make it productive in your country is clear. And the fourth one is disruption. I mean, you don't need to look very far. Just look at the news every single day. It seems that we live in a world where if you're a CEO chair, it's constant disruption, supply chain, markets, rules change. And for me, why Canada wins and why I think Canada is a strategic partner of choice in the 21st century, going back to my days in Cleveland when I had Henry Ford Henry King, who was a professor, was the last prosecutor at Nuremberg, always taught us that stability, predictability, and the rule of law is key. And I would say today it's in high demand and short supply. And therefore, when you look at the world in this 4D dimension, you understand why Canada succeeds. And to go back about the tariff, this for me was making sure we don't repeat the mistake of the past few decades where we outsource manufacturing. And then we find ourselves in a place where we then need to onshore, friendshore, however you want to bring that, to say, we need in the world today, I would say that economic security is national security. And in that sense, Canada is blessed by geography. Canada is blessed by the people who have come to enrich our society. But also, the fact that we have access to the largest market in the world, not only in the United States, but in Mexico. But if you look in Asia and in Europe, I always say Canada is not a country of 41 million people. I'm the bragger in chief of Canada, for those who don't know me. Everywhere I go, I brag about, and I say, we have market access to 1.5 billion consumers. So if you put like the talent you have, the strength of the ecosystems we have in this country, the critical minerals, and I would say proximity to resources is everything, because you want proximity to market, resources, and assembly line. If you look at renewable energy and access to market, you have the basic ingredient, I would say, to succeed in the 21st century. And what we did there was really to make sure we protect our industry, protect our worker, but also looking forward to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes, I would say, of the past to completely outsource our manufacturing. Because I think the rebirth of the auto sector is great. And you don't need to take it from me, but Bloomberg, even before I give them an interview, put Canada ahead of China. Canada ahead of China in the EV supply chain for the next 30 years. So that just gives you a sense of where we started and where we are today. And that's why I'm hopeful.
So there is a little bit of catching up to do. I think that is a fair comment when we talk about some of these 4Ds. I'm thinking particularly when we talk about critical minerals. So for a few years now, I've been hosting a podcast series called This Is Mining to share more about critical minerals and the role that they play. One thing that was very apparent, I had a chance to go down in a mine in Sudbury, and I was talking to a lot of the workers, and they talked a lot about the talent shortages. Knowing that, of course, a lot of miners are planning to retire in the next few years. So there is a massive shortage. We also see this, I think, to some extent when it comes to AI in the technology industry in Canada. We have the talent, but often that talent is drawn to other countries. So can you talk a little bit about how we sort of catch up and keep more of that talent here, get more people interested in some of these things we're discussing?
Sure. And by the way, I'd like to go on your podcast. It's a good podcast for everyone.
Thank you.
But I would say speed and scale. And I think the people in the room are the people to make it. When you look at critical mineral and you talk about sustainability today and scaling, for me, this is the word. Every CEO, every chair, every board that I go, every business leaders, I would say, it's all about speed and scale, because it's one thing to have the critical minerals. It's something else to refine them and to make them in a product that you can use in the supply chain. And Canada, in that sense, what we need to do better is to match supply and demand. I was talking to our U.S. folks, and as Louis was mentioning, spent quite some time. For those who don't know me, I'm also the co-chair of the Canada-US engagement, so what we call Team Canada. So spent a fair amount of time with governors, and my job is to connect the dots, because a number of times people don't realize that their plants in South Carolina, in Georgia, for example, depends on the critical mineral. To give you an example, the green aluminum that is produced by Rio Tinto in Saguenay in Quebec is now used by BMW in their car, and Audi just announced that recently. So I was connecting these things because what we need to do are better things, and a lot of folks in the room can help. I was saying to our colleagues, it's even, obviously between Canada and US, but I think even at the G7 and NATO, because in the world of supply chain resiliency, and I can tell you that's the word that I hear the most, apart from security. When I go down south, it's always first security, then supply chain resiliency, then a growth agenda. But when you're thinking about that, you see the role that we need to do better in terms of knowing the demand, finding the capital, and then having speed and scale. Because to your point, the critical minerals is something that we have. And I think for me, I think, critical minerals will be in the 21st century, I think what oil was in the 20th century. Because critical minerals are good for batteries, you would say, but they're even more fundamental for microchips. And if you agree with me that semiconductor is the DNA of progress, you would understand that the nation in the world who possess all the critical minerals to manufacture semiconductor will have a key role geostrategically in the world of the 21st century. So I agree with you on that. On the talent piece with AI, I think that is some. I think Canada has been, in a sense, at the forefront of AI, and I must say we were the first nation to have a national AI strategy. We were the first with the European Union to introduce a law, because I would say to move from fear to opportunity, you need to build trust, and you build trust to regulation. Because I think if we were to go out today and ask people in the street, the jury is out if people see what AI can do for them. And therefore, I think we need to build trust. The third thing we did was when the White House, when President Biden announced this voluntary code of conduct, we followed suit with our own version of that. And now what we've been doing is we hosted President Macron just a few days ago. And we were talking about the computing power, because I think that's where it's leading us, and with computing power, the question that everyone in this room should think about is energy. And you don't need to take it from me, but I think Gary Cohn, which used to be the advisor to President Trump when he was in office, former CEO of Goldman Sachs and now vice chair of IBM, he's been pretty vocal that if you look at the production, the generation of energy and demand in the United States, the two lines are about like that. When you add AI and quantum, you see a dislocation, and therefore energy becomes a key challenge that Canada can help resolve. So I think when you say in the world of AI, we're well positioned. And also because when you look what just was announced in the United Kingdom, I think yesterday, when I think was Microsoft looking at small modular reactor, and I know there's some folks here, how we're going to power these data centers with renewable energy. I think that's going to be key also for the 21st century, because if you want to be sustainable and at the same time benefit from the world of the 21st century with the productivity that you can gain with AI, you certainly need to find a way to produce renewable energy. Now, we've been blessed because in this country, for those who are not Canadians, it's about 80% of what we produce. If you go just the province next door, it's about 100% in Quebec. So we're in a great position. And I must say, this is something that, when you look at industry, and I often read at CDR, which was one of the great minister of industry during the wartime in Canada, you really have to think not only where we are today, but try to project yourself 20, 30 years from now and build the conditions for Canada to succeed. I think today we are largely benefiting from dividends of generations before us, which had the foresight to give market access to Canada, to build the infrastructure needed for renewable energy, to attract the talent with our immigration policy. Every time I wake up in the morning, I say, what am I doing today to make sure that future generation will also benefit from the dividends that we're putting in place today? Because these are mega trends. And for me, what we've been able to do is to seize generational opportunity. Vaccines with Moderna, where we have the largest plant or the newest plant in the world in Canada. Same thing with the battery ecosystem. Same thing with, for example, titanium and aluminum. Same thing on the energy with Dow, the largest project in Dow's history in Fort Saskatchewan. Same thing with BHP. BHP, by the way, people ask, is it going well in mining? Well, if you ask Mike Henry, the largest project in BHP's history was phase 1 of Jensen in Saskatchewan. Phase 2 of Jensen was the second largest in 150 years of history. That's $22 billion in 2 years that have been invested in CapEx in Canada. So I would say we're on a good track. But in a world of uncertainty, we need to double down.
100%. So let's say that we get speed and scale right. We all work really hard. I know you have lots of ambition, but there has been this conversation recently in Canada about ambition. Some people, including the president of Shopify, saying at a recent event that Canada needs more ambition. What would you say to that?
Oh, listen, I finished all of my speech about, let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious. When Arlie said that, I sent him, you have these text messages where you can send like a heart or something, push the symbol, and I sent it. I said, listen, I agree with you totally. I think, when you have what Canada have, and trust me, there's obviously things we can do better, and there's things we need to do better. But when you look at the macro perspective, I think it's probably the benefit like having a forum like that where you see the big picture. You realize what are your strengths. If you do a SWOT analysis, what the strength, the weakness, the opportunities, and the threat, you position Canada on the map. And when you talk to global actors which operate in different markets, you see what we have. And I think one of the things is that we're not bragging enough about. I mean, in the DNA of Canadians is humility, which is a good thing. I mean, we are fairly humble as a nation. But when you look at the state of the world and what we can bring to the world, and I think when the fundamentals are right, there's something to be proud of and to talk about opportunities, to talk about possibilities, to talk about Canada winning in the 21st century. Because, very few countries in the world can share a geography with the United States, which is still one of the largest markets in the world. Very few can attract still talent. We're probably one of the few G7 countries where immigration is still seen as a net positive. Very few nations have an ecosystem that you build car from, if you go from energy to car to aerospace. Montreal is the third largest city in the world to manufacture planes. We have Boeing, Airbus, Bombardier. You have critical minerals, so that is it's kind of the gold, or like I say, the equivalent of oil in the 20th century. And you have market access. I mean, think about if you're a nation in the world, what would you want? I think we have that. Now what we need is to match that with ambition. And certainly working towards, as a nation, to let's seize these generational opportunities ahead of us.
Yeah, and there are people who come here to Canada to work. I mean, if we think about Geoffrey Hinton, who everybody knows is the godfather of AI, who just won a Nobel Prize, people may not know, but he actually came to Canada in the 1980s because he was upset with the way that the U.S. was viewing AI in terms of warfare. So he decided to come here. So those are those stories which I think we need to get a lot better at telling in the future. So one last question for you, if we want to stick close to our time. And this is a big one, which is about the election in the U.S. coming up in just a few weeks. I know it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future, impossible to tell, but what are you most concerned about?
It's good. I have 0 time left.
No,
I'm joking. Listen, I think that the one thing, from a Canadian perspective, I think the team in place is probably the best one because we have the experience and the expertise to deal with either a Republican or Democrat administration. I was foreign minister at the time of Mike Pompeo, so part of the Trump administration. Chrystia Freeland has been involved as well in the negotiation. Obviously, we worked with, at the time, the team of President Obama and President Biden. So I would say, we have the expertise to deal with both. So our mission, and my mission has always been to bring the voice of Canada to the United States and say, it's not sufficient for our friends down south to see Canada as kind of the friendly neighbor of the North, but more as the strategic partner for the 21st century. And that's why when I go to Washington, it's always about security, because the thing that resonates in the United States is about security. And like I said, national security, economic security, that's you get any audience in the United States. And security in the North and the Arctic, which matters a lot. Then supply chain resiliency. because after COVID, I think people would be very concerned. In the words of one CEO, he said, you know what I like about you folks down in Canada? He said, if things go bad, I can truck stuff across. And if they go really bad, I'll go put it in the back of my pickup truck and get it to my plant. So that's kind of the things where people see Canada more as a strategic partner. And the last one is kind of a growth agenda, because a decision on one side of the border will have an impact on both. So with the fundamentals we have now, how can we build a growth agenda that would serve both nations? Because the challenge we have here, whether it's about cost of living, whether it's about housing, whether it's about grocery, look at the teams in the United States. They're not very different. But the good thing about the message we bring, as I call that, the indispensable relationship. And I know a lot of colleagues around the world like to qualify their relationship with the United States, but I call ourselves the indispensable relationship because of these three factors. And what is good about that, Amber, is that when you talk to Republicans, they say, we like you, man, because you talk business. When I talk to Democrats, they say, oh, Bush, we love you because you're aligned on policy. So I think it's kind of the message that has been rallying people on both sides. And that's why I've been so adamant, regardless of what may happen on November 5th, is that they see us as the strategic partner, because it's not only good enough to be seen as a nice neighbor, you want to be seen as a strategic neighbor, especially in the world of the 4Ds that I talked about. People, talk about supply chain. I mean, I've never thought in my life that people would talk to me more about supply chain. But every time, we had Jake Sullivan coming recently when we were in Halifax, the National Security Advisor to the President. And a good part of the discussion was around supply chain resiliency. So these things are for me what we need to do. So I always say to folks, let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious, and let's go Canada.
So we'll have to have another conversation in a few weeks. Thank you so much.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Merci tout le monde.